Hi there. Meet my Stone Mountain Banjo Man. This is a colored pencil drawing that I did, and I am very excited to be able to tell you a little bit about how I did it. Maybe it'll help you with some of your colored pencil drawing work, or you want to get into colored pencils. I took a picture with my Nikon D800 camera of a banjo player that was at Stone Mountain Park when I was there with my family a couple of years ago. And he was just having a ball playing his banjo, and I took this picture, and I've wanted to do something with it ever since I took it. And so I'm going to go through the process I went through to create this drawing. I entered it into the Colored Pencil Society of America Explore This show, and it was juried in, which I was so thrilled about because it's a pretty exclusive show. So I wanted to take a few minutes. I videotaped the whole process because I wanted to mainly be able to remember what I'd done. I have so many drawings and paintings that I've done, and I go, boy, I sure wish I had taken some notes on how to do that. And I also have some grandkids that are interested in art, and I thought, what a great way to be able to have something for them to see. So I'm going to explain a little bit about the process I'm going through here on this drawing. This is actually a drawing on UArt 800 sanded paper, and you might want to do a Google search on that if you're not familiar with the UArt sanded paper. It's the 800 grit paper. It's just like sandpaper, but it's real fine, and it's made for art. And it has a texture that allows you to use a pencil, colored pencils, or graphite pencils, and be able to not have a surface that gets all waxed up or built up with pigment to the point where you can't continue to add more pigment. Here I'm doing an underpainting with burnt umber pencil, and you'll see a sepia tone to the surface. Well, that sepia is actually acrylic ink, sepia ink that you can buy in a bottle, and I put it in a little squirt spray bottle and sprayed sepia ink all over the surface, diluted a little bit with water, and that gave me a really nice texture. I used to do a lot of oil painting, and I'd always loved colored pencils, but the one thing I didn't like about it was I couldn't replicate what I did with oils in colored pencil, in that with oils you can do an underpainting like you're seeing here, and then come back in with your oils and begin the process of building layers and layers of oil paints to finally get to the point where you're putting highlights and shadows and detail in. With colored pencil, the more layers you put on on a typical piece of paper, you're going to build up more and more of the binder for the pencil, which in some cases is wax with Prismacolors, or with the polychromos pencils, which I use here. It's a oil-based pencil. So if you use a slick piece of paper, you wind up, as the more pigment you put down, the more wax you build up. Instead, you get to a point where you really have a hard time adding in details, especially highlights, like maybe a highlight in an eye with white. With the sanded paper, you don't ever lose that texture. And the other thing is I used here was the powder blender system, which has become a real interesting hot topic right now. And you'll see on the upper right hand side of this screenshot the little dish of powder and a little foam brush. That's actually a medium that takes the colored pencil, and it will lift it and create a powder, and you can then put down the powder, or put in the powder using a foam brush, and it just does a great job of almost becoming a paintbrush, like a liquid paint. It also is companioned up with a spray fixative, which they have developed, which has a texture built into it. And so as I'm drawing, for example, on this guitar, I can draw in a dark underpainting, so to speak, and then I can take the spray fixative and spray it on, and it becomes a textured fixative, where the texture of the sanded art paper is maintained with a little grit. And so the next layer of colored pencil going over on top, whether it's light or dark, is easy to put on without having to worry about getting a wax buildup. You'll also see in this picture here, I've got my iPad, which I'd highly recommend if you do a lot of work, a little artwork, and you'd like to do portraits, or you'd like to do barns or landscapes or whatever. Take your photo and transfer it over to your iPad or your iPhone. You see here I'm able to move with my other hand the drawing around, pinch it to expand it or to compress it, and then see exactly what I'm working on, and real quickly be able to make adjustments. It's a great tool. There's also some apps. If you do a search for grid, artist grid, for example, there are apps that will allow you to overlay a grid on your iPad, which would correspond to a grid on your drawing, and it makes for a great tool to be able to do an initial layout. Here you're seeing me use the powder blender to blend some of the colored pencil pigment that's down, and smooth out some of the highlights and textures. And then you don't see here, but after each session, I did probably 5 or 6 nights working on this drawing, and at the end of each night I would spray fix the whole piece with the texture fixative, and then come back in the next day and I'd have a nice fresh grained, not grainy, but nice piece that would receive the colored pencil beautifully. So it's a terrific medium, and the brush and pencil product, the powder blender system, is just terrific. Here you see me laying in some lighter colors first and then going back in with the darker colors. And the nice thing about the system, the powder blender system, for example, is that I'm not too worried here if I mess up. If I was working strictly in colored pencil on a piece of regular paper and I put down that much dark pigment, you can forget me being able to go back in and correct that with a lighter pigment, or maybe change it or change some colors. With the fixative that is provided, I can spray that down, and then it's fixed in, but it also has a texture that's been added, and the texture allows me to go back in with the next layer. Here you see me putting a little blue everywhere. I got blue in the background, I got blue on his hat, blue on his face, blue on his beard, blue on the back of his chair, blue. Now I'm going to fill in the blue on his coat. And I do that with all the colors in a drawing, and I'd recommend that you do the same thing carefully. And that is that every color that you put on your drawing or your painting, take a little bit of that color and add it to the background. You'll see there that was my test piece of sanded paper that I would test things on to make sure it was going to give me the effect that I'm looking for. I'd do entire sections of the drawing on that test paper before I would work on the actual drawing. But do experiment with it, and it's really just really a lot of fun. You'll see this looks like it's a really fast process. If you were to see it and listen to the music I'm listening to, this probably is representing about 8 to 10 hours of work at least. And of course here it goes pretty quickly. The one thing you'll see coming up is there's a set of boards on the left hand side of him, which I had a place on this drawing where it had taken so long and I had running out of room in my camera and my computer, so I decided I was going to move everything down to my kitchen and work on the drawing there. And I worked probably 3 or 4 hours on the boards on the left. And interesting story is that the boards on the left were actually boards from a building that was up in North Georgia. My wife and I had gone up to North Georgia for an anniversary trip, and we stopped by a building that had some very weathered boards. Ironically, it was a building that I had helped with the architectural drawings 30 years ago, and it had been fallen into such bad disrepair that I had these beautifully weathered boards, which you'll see coming up in a little while. to work from, and instead of using the boards you see on the drawing on the left there, or on the photograph on the left there, it's kind of nice, neat painted boards. Those are actually Christmas lights that were strung. You see the dark streamers on the left-hand side of the iPad. Those were actually Christmas lights that they had strung between each board, which I knew I wasn't going to use. So I took my reference photo from the drawing, or from the photograph I took up in North Georgia, and that became my boards for the drawing. So I kind of married the Banjo Man with my long defunct building that I had helped design. So at least it still had some good use, and I have something to remember from that North Georgia building. And here I'm working back and forth on his face with the Payne's Gray. I love Payne's Gray. It's a great color that doesn't have any color. It's better than black. It's better than warm gray. It allows. I've used Payne's Gray in oils and in watercolor and in colored pencils, and to me, Payne's Gray is a lifesaver. I just love the effect. I could do a whole drawing and painting with nothing but warm gray, Payne's Gray, maybe a little bit of Venetian red, and so here you'll see me adding in the beard. Those are actually pencil strokes that are being put down to the beat of a nice Christian rock song that I was listening to late at night, and it was a lot of fun to be able to try to reproduce his beard using that white pencil there, and it actually looks pretty cool. You can see me zooming in on my iPad to get a better look. Also, you'll notice a white translucent piece of Mylar that I put underneath my hand. It's really a good idea to do that because your hand will continue to wipe across the sanded paper, pick up pigment, smear pigment. It's especially important on graphite and loose media. This does create some dust, and it helps keep the dust from spreading around. There you see I'm putting a white line over dark colored pencil, which is impossible to do. Literally, if you don't have something like a powder blender type system where you can, unless you put them in with a paintbrush and maybe a little acrylic media or acrylic paint or acrylic ink to create your white lines. But I'm able to do a nice job of being able to add those. So here I've moved downstairs. You see the boards on the left that came from the building that I had designed, and I'm signing my name and signing off here. But I really hope this video will help inspire some folks to be able to get involved with some colored pencil stuff, and they get some ideas. And check out brushandpencil.com, and also check out cpsa.org, Colored Pencil Society of America website, and find all kinds of tips and hints and tricks and join up.